Hi, this is Catherine Moore, and tonight I'm going to be covering page 19 of the Sexual Ethics Policy for the Texas Annual Conference Administration of the United Methodist Denomination in Houston, Texas. Tomorrow I will be finishing up on this policy, and tomorrow's Friday, so Saturday I will start covering the Safe Sanctuary Policy uh, of the Texas Annual Conference and the United Methodist Denomination. So this is page 19, section 81.007, Limited Immunity from Liability. A person who, in good faith, makes a report required by section 81.006 is immune from civil or criminal liability resulting from the filing of that report. This is B, reporting under this chapter is presumed to be done in good faith. C, the immunity provided by this section does not apply to liability resulting from sexual exploitation. Oh, I lost it. Let me go back. Sorry about that. Let's see, where was I at? From sexual exploitation by a mental health services provider of a patient or former patient, added by Acts 1993, 73rd legislation. I already read that. Section 81.008, admission of evidence. A, an action for sexual exploitation, evidence of the plaintiff's sexual history and reputation is not admissible unless 1. The plaintiff claims damage to sexual functioning, or 2. A. The defendant requests a hearing before trial and makes an offer of proof of the relevancy of the history or reputation, and B. The court finds that the history or reputation is relevant and that the probative value of the evidence outweighs its prejudicial effect. B. The court may allow the admission only of specific information or examples of the plaintiff's. I should have printed this out, but I could not afford to do that. And I couldn't afford to buy the ink. So I'm reading it from my phone. Okay. B. The court may allow the admission only of specific information or examples of the plaintiff's conduct that are determined by the court to be relevant. The court's order shall detail the information or conduct that is admissible, and no other such evidence may be introduced. Added by Acts 1993, 73rd Legislature, Chapter CH.573, Section 2.01, effective September 1st, 1993. Section 81.009, limitations. A. Except as otherwise provided by this section, an action under this chapter must be filed before the third anniversary of the date the patient or former patient understood or should have understood the conduct for which liability is established under Section 81.002 or 81.003. B, if a patient or former patient entitled to file an action under this chapter is unable to bring the action because of the effects of the sexual exploitation, continued emotional dependence on the mental health services provider, or threats, instructions, or statements by the mental health services provider, the deadline for filing an action under this chapter is told during that period, except that the deadline may not be told for more than 15 years. C, this section does not apply to a patient or former patient who is a child or a minor as defined by Section 101.003 Family Code until that patient or former patient has reached the age of 18. If the action is brought by a parent, guardian, or other person having custody of the child or minor, it must be brought within the period set forth in this section. So I'm going to continue and finish up 20, which means I will start the Safe Sanctuary policy sooner than Saturday. I'll just start tomorrow. Section 81.010, Injunctive Relief Against Governmental Units. A, this section, governmental unit, has the meaning assigned by Section 101.001, parentheses 3, parentheses B. B, subject to subsection C, a patient, a former patient, or another person acting on behalf of a patient or former patient may bring an action under this section against a government unit that is an employer of a mental health services provider, including a special officer for mental health assignment who commits any conduct described by Section 81.002, parentheses 1, parentheses 2, or parentheses 3, in relation to the patient or former patient in an action brought under this subsection. The patient or former patient may obtain 1, an order requiring the governmental unit to discharge the mental health services provider who committed the conduct, 2, court costs, and 3, reasonable attorney's fees determined by the court. C, a patient, former patient, or person acting on behalf of a patient or a former patient may not bring an action under subsection B unless 60 days before the date that action is to be filed, the person notifies the governmental unit in writing of its intention to bring an action under this section. The notice must reasonably describe the facts giving rise to the claim. If before the 60th day after the date the notice is provided under this section, the governmental unit discharges the mental health services provider who committed the conduct with respect to which the claim is filed, the person may not bring suit under subsection B. D, governmental immunity to suit is waived and abolished only to the extent of the liability created by subsection B, added by Acts 1999 76 Legislature, CH 1102, Section 2, effective September 1st, 1999. And right here it says confidential notice of concern. There is a form to fill out. Who is the complaint about? Their position. Date incident occurred. Church, school, or institution. City where church, school, institution is located. Nature of concern. Describe the situation. Where did it happen? Who else was present? Has it ever happened before? Was it reported? Yes, no, don't know. If reported, who was it reported to? What action was taken? Follow up. Does anyone need to be notified? Would you like someone to call to discuss the situation? Yes or no? And then you put your name, address, the signature, your phone number, and date. And this is a form if you have a complaint for the Texas Annual Conference. I was never informed of that. I contacted the conference office many times. I was never informed of that. I was never informed of that when I met with Bishop Huey for an hour in her office. I was never informed of that when I called the conference office and told them about parents being followed to the restroom, that I was a survivor of sexual assault. I was never told that by the domestic relations office, and I'm sure part of the reason why I wasn't told that by the domestic relations office is because the Texas Annual Conference didn't share that with them. I was never informed of that when I called St. Stephen's United Methodist Church. I was never informed of that when I was at Lakewood United Methodist Church while they were under the Texas Annual Conference administration, when I complained about a church member watching me in the Sunday school class and then sitting beside me in the sanctuary, and there was nowhere to go, and sharing personal information with me about his marriage and crying. No one informed me of that. No one. I spoke with so many people. I spoke with staff of St. Paul's United Methodist Church in Houston, Texas. I spoke with people in the conference administration. I spoke with the secretary, Nancy Henshaw, for the bishop on multiple occasions, was never informed of that. I went to college with her daughter. I spoke with people at Lakewood United Methodist Church. No one informed me of this form. No one. I was blown off, discarded. And the fact that my beneficiary check was withheld from me for my mother's death, was withheld from me till it was almost forfeited, that would apply to this form. The fact that my car was withheld from me in a document revealing the identity of a woman who was sexually assaulted by a clergy that received a settlement from the Texas Annual Conference, that would apply to this form. But I'm quite sure she was never informed of that. And the Texas Annual Conference administration has a responsibility to follow through on these policies and provide the correct information to anyone who needs to file a complaint But what do they do instead? They read a pathetic letter at annual conference to clergy who are usually the people responsible for the misconduct that takes place. These clergy have to go through extensive continuing education training. They have to go through workshops where they sit all day and somebody lectures them about how to prevent sexual misconduct. I am a product of the Texas Annual Conference Administration. If they think I'm garbage or a worthless piece of shit and my life does not matter, what do they think of themselves? Because I came from them. I was raised amongst them, because I can tell you, growing up in the Texas Annual Conference, the saying, "It takes a village," definitely applies. And I understand why I would get so angry in my first marriage when my mother-in-law and my first husband would remind me of the saying, "It takes a village." Because that saying applies to the Texas Annual Conference Administration. My willingness to communicate what I need, what I want, what happened to me, how it made me feel, what's going on with my kids, my ability to communicate effectively came from being raised within the Texas Annual Conference. And it is shameful that they lacked the integrity and the human decency to provide me with the correct information to file a complaint. What is the point in this? This is garbage. This is bullshit, because you don't use it. What is the point of it? Bishop Harvey knows who I am. Scott Jones knows who I am, because he was the bishop during part of the time this was going on. I called him out on Facebook. I mean, it doesn't make sense why you have all of this wording that is so complicated, and you don't even have the decency to inform your victims with the right information. You'll help retired clergy. You'll provide a fund for retired clergy to get assistance with medical costs. But you will do nothing for the lives and the people that you harm with the clergy that you employ under your administration. And it's sad, really. And it's interesting how Judge Morris Hassel, who was a lay person, but yet he had these important roles on these committees, which is rare. For a lay person to be the chairperson of the board of directors for Lakeview to be the chairman of the Board of Trustees of the Texas Annual Conference and the chairman of the Board of Trustees for Lon Morris College. And he was so well respected, but guess what? Judge Hassel and I came from the same people within the same small town of Jacksonville, Texas. Judge Hassel came from the Hassel family, obviously, because he has the Hassel name. I am a descendant of the Hassel family because my maternal grandmother's maiden name was Hassel. Ross Fulton Sr., who was a district superintendent in Missouri Conference, his wife, Marie Fulton, was my maternal grandmother's sister. I've got stories about that, but that's for another time. And the other side that Judge Hassel came from were people within the United Methodist. It was before it was called United Methodist, because that really wasn't until 1968. I understand that. Okay, there's a little bit left up here in my brain. Not much, but maybe just a little. And Judge Hassel and I both came from the Hassel family, and we were raised within the Methodist denomination in the Texas Annual Conference, because they merged with the East Texas Annual Conference in 1902. Judge Morris Hassel was born in 1916. Also, I wanted to talk about my mental health. So, I have multiple disabilities, and I'll tell you what they are. I have the diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder. I also have a learning disability. I've had that all my life. I don't really think much of it. I don't really care anymore. And it was a battle. And that's part of the reason why I'm so stubborn about advocating for myself, because I had to advocate for myself when I was a kid regarding my education. Because part of what saved me was learning how to sing in children's choirs. That helped me be more articulate and helped me with my communication skills. And I had to work so hard to advocate for myself, because in the background, behind my back, my parents were downplaying my intelligence, telling people I was slow. They were sabotaging me. And I was having to literally work against that. I was having to work against the teachers, and I was having to work against my parents. I didn't realize that at the time. I know now. I know what my mother said behind my back, because other clergy have told me. And I also have an autoimmune disease, Hashimoto's, which can also affect my mental health. I deal with chronic fatigue. I have used anger to propel me, to give me the energy I need to function. It's not one of my great qualities, but I have done that. I have brain fog from the health issues that I have, and now I'm becoming diabetic because it's in my genetics. I also, there has been a decline in my mobility. My hips are going out. When I get up, like from the bed or from a sitting position, I have to brace myself and hold on to things, because as soon as I stand up, I cannot immediately take a step forward. A cane or a walker probably would help me at home, but I just refuse. It has to get much worse before I'm willing to do that. I just can't stand the idea of it. I probably, if I have hip replacements, which at some point I'm going to have to do something. But here's why I'm talking about this. Because there have been clergy within the Texas Annual Conference that has wanted to come after my mental health, despite the fact that they are not qualified to diagnose me. And for some reason, they think that the other health issues I have, I have asthma, by the way, that the other health issues I have are just not as relevant, right? Because those health issues, if I'm fatigued, that's not going to affect my mental health. If I'm dealing with retaliation from a multi-billion-dollar administration, that's not low. Let's just focus on what's wrong with her so nobody else looks at the rest. But I'll tell you what, I'll make a trade. Okay? I'll trade the Hashimoto's and the chronic fatigue, and I'm always in chronic pain because of the problems with my hip, okay? I will trade the Hashimoto's and the chronic fatigue, and I will trade the hypervigilance from the PTSD. I mean, hell, they can have the PTSD, the complex PTSD, they can have it. I will trade the complex PTSD. Oh, and the pre-diabetes, I'll trade that. And the Hashimoto's. And the problems with my hips for, I don't know, I mean, maybe they could call in an order, since, the Texas conference wants somehow a mental health diagnosis to discredit me, because Harrison Fisher did say that the Texas Annual Conference would say that I was mentally ill and not capable of taking care of our kids. Meanwhile, in the past year, our 16-year-old has said that he wants his brother to die a slow and painful death. And Harrison Fisher said that they would help my ex-husband get our kids away from me, even though they haven't met him behind closed doors and seen how abusive he is. And they sure as hell didn't watch when he dragged our son 5 feet across the carpet, physically injuring him and not seeking medical treatment, or when he put his hands around his throat, making him think he was going to choke him and kill him. But I'll trade them. They want me to be mentally ill? That's fine. I will trade the pre-diabetes, the problems with my hips, the asthma, and the Hashimoto's, and the complex PTSD. I'll trade those for, let's say, schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder, right? We'll trade. How crazy does that sound? because that's not how it works. Because a doctor knows that if you walk in there and you say, well, I think I have this, and can we put it in order for this because, I want to have this problem, they'll think you're crazy. I mean, how about instead of meddling in someone's well-being and mental health when you have no business doing that, or inflicting more mental health problems on someone who's been through abuse, actually helping them and correcting the situation that the Texas Annual Conference administration is responsible for. How about that? And the United Methodist clergy that tried to tell me that he would help me only if I agreed to go on medication specifically for bipolar disorder, who was employed under the Texas Annual Conference administration and did not have a medical degree and was not qualified to make a mental health diagnosis. Perhaps he should have focused on losing weight and his health instead of trying to diagnose me, because I was in a highly abusive situation at the time. And before you can make any assumptions about somebody's health, mental health, if they're in a seriously abusive situation, that should be focused on. Because nobody's mental health is going to be good if they're in an abusive situation. And perhaps when Marla Tabb was alive and she was being difficult, that should have been realized, and it wasn't. Because there are always signs, red flags that can be seen before domestic violence and abusive situations escalate to the point that someone is seriously or fatally harmed. And if my parents thought that I would be alive to tell my story today, if my mother thought I was going to record her admitting to drugging me so that my father could sexually assault me, John Dowden, who was employed under the Texas Annual Conference administration, they would have overdosed me. And I would not be here today. And nobody would have asked any questions, because it would have been back in the 80s. And for some reason, people were stupid enough to take them at their word. The Texas Annual Conference of the United Methodist denomination has a responsibility, an ethical responsibility, to protect everyone, not just children, everyone within their administration. Not to victim blame, but to protect people who have been harmed by clergy employed under their administration.